Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back to everyone who is already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now, which is a returning guest on the show. He's a professional MMA fighter, and I tried really hard, maybe about a year ago, to get a nickname to stick for him, which it has not stuck, but I'm still going to introduce him as if it did stick. So here we go. Welcome back to the show, Kyle Problematic Zimick.
Yeah,
Kyle,
yeah.
welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be on here.
I just realized if I call you Mr. or Professor, boom, Mr. Problematic or Professor, Doctor,
I
got
like
it, we
it.
got it. Kyle, Doctor Problematic. The reason why we're doing this at the beginning is because I had the honor and privilege of seeing Kyle Zimick fight for 247 Fighting Championship, a great fight against Justin, the General Patton. And we had talked about how if Kyle won, which you did, you won an impressive third round guillotine fashion, that I would come up with a nickname since I was calling that fight. And I thought problematic, meaning you're problematic for everybody in your weight division, and it rhymes with Zimick, which is not the
Yep.
easiest. I thought it was great, but Kyle's friends did not think it was great. So try on Professor Problematic, Doctor Problematic, or Mister Problematic. I'm thinking one of those will work because it sounds a little bit fancier. Sir Problematic, whatever. Try it out. Anyhow, great to have you on the show. While we could talk nicknames the whole time, you've got a fight coming up, which you're going to preview. And we're also going to talk about the fact that even though you primarily home gym is Rising Son MMA, you recently went out to Colorado. So let's jump in. First off, how long ago did this fight come together? Talk about the fight that's going to be in November, and then just the fact that you got it on the calendar, and then what led you to go out to Elevate in Colorado.
Yeah. So the fight came out maybe about a month ago now. We've known. But you're healthy, like 8 weeks out type of thing is what we knew for preparing wise, which is wonderful. It's enough time to diet down, enough time to get sharp and everything like that. Um, so yeah, that's been good. All the preparation and everything has been really, really good. Yeah, and then last week, I was out in Colorado for a couple weeks prior to that, just doing some training at a high altitude, just getting some different looks out there, kind of testing yourself. One of those where when you're in the same fishbowl for too long, everyone knows what you do, you know what everyone else does. So the game of cat and mouse becomes a little bit different, right? There's not that test anymore. So it was just a really good experience to get out there, see what I got, test my style against a totally different style than what they teach out there. And yeah, just get some different looks, learn some new things, and yeah, just keep evolving the game. That's what it's all about.
Makes perfect sense. There's a lot of uh, every MMA fighter takes a different path. It's great that you have a home gym, but it's also kind of like self-study in the sense that
Right.
you're responsible for your own curriculum and going out to Colorado. What gym was it? I think it's a gym I've heard of. And about how many people were in your roughly weight division, maybe 10 pounds up, 10 pounds below you?
Yeah, so I went to high altitude martial arts. That's where like Corey Sanhagen and some of the bigger names you see train out of. So they're a well-known gym. Yeah, training partner wise out there, it was wonderful. I don't think a day went by that I didn't like everyone I went with right around my size. It's like the perfect looks. Every now and then you go, guys a little bit bigger than you, a little bit smaller than you. Do you want to test your power? Do you want to test your speed? What are you looking for? But for the most part, yeah, I was like the guys I was working with right around my size. It's perfect.
Yeah, that is really special. Without giving technique or any hints away, like what did you think was the most profitable for going out there? Was it the different looks? Was it the altitude? Was it a combination? Was there a type of instructor that was helpful for you? Kind of what are some of the bigger takeaways without getting into how you're going to implement it?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I thought all around, I think a lot of it. combinations of a lot of it made it so great. The elevation, you've seen me fight. I'm a big cardio guy. I like to push the pace. So training out in high elevation, wonderful. Um, just the different training partners, not really knowing how someone's going to move was great to like test not only the physical part of the game, but the mental part of the game of how quickly can you adapt and overcome to the differences? Can you pick up on stuff or not? So it was a great mental push too. But yeah, just little techniques here and there and stuff too. Different ways they show stuff, it's like a math equation. Sometimes when you're teaching math, you don't get it. Somebody describes it another way and light bulb goes on. There you go. It's like, oh, okay, that made sense this time. So, sometimes just having a different person tell you how to do something or they show it a little bit different and just clicks.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm glad you got out there. And it's more about how you implement it, right? I always
Right.
say for somebody who's dehydrating to death, uh, holding water doesn't really save them. It's when you put the water inside of you, right? It's absorbing the information, it's applying it to your skill set and your style. And you had that great stylistic matchup with Justin that I got to sit cage sides and call, and he's kind of at the tall end of 145, and you're at the power, like at the strong, kind of thick power end of 145. So you're going to constantly be dealing with that matchup. Now, speaking of matchups, you've got an undefeated opponent coming up. He's currently 2-0. Hopefully his O will go. At least that's your plan on November 2nd. But talk a little bit about what you know about Tanner Trembly, and if you're game planning specifically to him, and it's okay, don't tell me what it is, but do you do research on him, or is it more about getting yourself better, or a combination? Like, what does this matchup against Tanner Trembly mean to you? He's 2-0, and this is going down for Ignite Promotions for Mecca 23 on November 2nd.
Yeah, he's 2-0. He's 2-0 for a reason. He's good. Young in his pro career, much like myself. Um, from what I've seen, from what my team has studied, the guy can do it all. I think we're in a day and age of MMA where even the young regional pro scene guys, like if you can't do it all, it's tough, man. You got to really be well rounded in the sport nowadays. So yeah, I mean, he's got some heavy hands that we've seen on the feet. I trust his past, his background on the ground is going to be good, but at the same time, I'm more than willing to test that. I like my ground style, I like my stand-up style, so I'm more than willing to test him wherever this fight goes, and may the best man win.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. You've always relied on your skill. I remember the first time I had you on, you were talking about, I was talking about how kind of long of an amateur career you had. You ended up 9 wins, 2 losses. That's a lot in amateur. And you had mentioned that your mindset is to really focus on the development. And here you are fighting a guy who is off to a great start, just like you are. We didn't get to talk, and you're focused on this fight, but you did pick up a loss in your pro career, a split decision loss, which I'm sure in some ways it's the worst possible type of loss, and in
Yep.
some ways it's the best possible type of loss because it means that that somebody saw you winning it. So overall, mindset wise, you're no longer officially undefeated as a pro. Mindset wise, are you still focused in on kind of the development of your pro career? Is that something that bothers you, doesn't bother you? And then we'll get back to this upcoming fight. But I did see it on your record. I thought, oh, gotta bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always had a pretty healthy mindset when it comes to stuff like that. It never drags me down, so to speak, but it'll definitely light a fire under my butt. I use that as motivation, fuel. When you're getting those workouts in and you're like, oh, I'm tired, I want to stop. It's like, not happening, right? You remember what happened last time? Like, you need that extra push. So yeah, Mentally wise, it was a split decision loss. It was close. Personally, I still think I had it won, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, it goes down as a loss. And I also don't take the other approach though of I feel like I probably won, so I don't need to learn anything. Like, no, there was a lot of stuff to learn from that fight, and there was a lot of stuff I took away from it as well. And I've been in the gym constantly working on those lessons and growing myself. So, split decision losses, yeah, they burn, but you can also learn a lot from them. It's the age-old saying, right? It's like, you win or you learn, right? You don't lose. Only time you lose is when you don't learn. So I keep that moving forward, and I think it's really, really been helpful.
Sure. Yeah. One of the reasons why I like having you on the show, obviously, you're super talented. You have a potential brilliant career ahead of you in MMA. But one of the reasons is because you really care about how you express yourself, how you speak, the answers you give. That's why we have such a good time interviewing. One of the things that can
Right.
be very interesting, and as a coach, and I love that slogan, you win or you learn. I think one of the more, you did a great job answering kind of both sides of a split decision, and obviously coming away with what you can do better is fantastic. I think one of the more challenging aspects of particularly MMA, but it could be almost any individual sport, is I always like to say you learn or you learn, because the problem with winning, and we've seen this, the problem with winning, particularly in individual sport, is sometimes winning kind of covers up the progress that does need to be made. We've seen, I'm not going to say people, we've seen people at the UFC level that had uh, obvious holes in their game. And yeah, I am thinking of one in particular, but Ben
Sure.
Askren. But the reality is, it was brought up to him over and over again. It was very obvious his striking deficiency, to the point where it came out later that he would, and I wish him the best. And obviously, he had a great career, but it was an obvious deficiency that he never really worked to address. And it caught him, and that'll happen, right? But I think one of the challenges can be when you're getting away with, and as a coach, that's what I would always say. I'd say it like, hey, you really got away with something in that fight. Let's address it. And that's kind of like the mindset you have when you do win. I think it's important, and I'm sure you do, to break down the areas you could have done better. Not to be too harsh, but just to be aware that just because somebody did not take advantage. I'm a big stickler for hand return. And a lot of times fighters won't get their hands back, and their opponent isn't, let's say, good enough to exploit that. But
Sure.
at some point, you're going to fight somebody who will exploit that type thing. Same thing when people stall on takedown attempts. And I've seen what the guillotine can do. You have to have a game plan that if you do stall, that you keep moving, that you turn, you take the back or switch or change it from a double to a single. You can't just stall out. And a lot of times fighters will stall out. It won't hurt them right up until it does. So for you, coming off this loss, going up against an undefeated guy, having that mindset that you want to be the guy that takes on really tough challenges. You did that with Justin. You were 1-0 fighting a guy with, I think, 5 or 6 pro fights. We
I
talked
think it
about
was
it.
5-2 at the time.
5-2. Yeah, is that what it was? Yeah, I remember it was.
Yeah.
So you are a tester. You want to test yourself. What do you want to see out of yourself on November 2nd?
Yeah, honestly, it's just, do I see the growth in all aspects? Obviously there is parts of my game that I'm focused on right now. So to see improvement, which I do in the gym, is great. But at the same time, if I don't see those improvements in the octagon, then it's okay, we got to keep working on this more. So that's what I like about this sport too, is you can work all day, every day in the gym, right? But when the lights are on, like that's where we see, like, are you getting better? Is there growth happening? So yeah, that's the like, just the little aspects, places I want to see. And it's like I'm gonna test it in the octagon on November 2nd, and we're gonna make sure they're getting better.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part. I can't wait for the follow up to see how things go. You'll be way out there in Minnesota for
Yeah.
that. See, I nailed it for that fight. That's exciting. You're traveling. You're getting out there. I often say this as a coach, that like retaining implementation, right? Like you learn it. Just like both my parents are teachers, and it's really about not just learning, but then being able to implement it. And you bring up a good point. MMA is all about not what you know; it's about what you can implement. And sometimes people know a lot that there's something that happens where the implementing is tricky. And then we know that there's some fighters, and you can work around that. There's ways to continue to develop, but I've seen some fighters literally learn. We've heard it. I've seen it backstage. Sometimes as a coach, I'd say, hey, keep this in mind. And a fighter will have seen it demonstrated one time and see the opening in a fight and use it. And you're like, what? So you just never know. But I think it's always about finding your own strengths, and come November 2nd for you to be able to implement at least part of some of those new tools. I don't think we should ever think that we'll get it completely right, but to see that step, that progress. Do you have what are your like your gratitude list, your shout out? Like, let's get to whether you have sponsors as far as paid sponsors, or even just supporters as far as friends, gym mates, that type of stuff. Who are you grateful to going into the last, under a month out from the fight?
Yeah. It's always good to pay homage back to, my home gym, Rising Son. They've done a lot for me. Lon Shirley are always helping me out with stuff. I want to thank the guys over at High Altitude as well. When I got there, there was no awkward, like, who is this guy? How it was like right away, super homely feeling. So that really helped, just right away. It was just go. So I want to say thanks to those guys. All my sponsors that I can never think of off the top of my head, obviously. One in particular, Fast Fries. I want to shout them out. Owned by one of my NCOs from the military. So, it's always good to see him succeeding. I want to thank I got a new one. We're gonna be showing up in style for this fight. We got a limo ride. So, that's always it's always dope. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, just friends and family especially. My mom and my dad are the most supportive parents. Even growing up, I don't think they ever missed a sporting event, even from me and my sister. She was on one side of the state, I was on the other. They were gonna make them. So I want to shout out to those two because I wouldn't be here without them, really. So yeah.
Well, that's a great list. In my mind, do not do this before the fight, but it might, because you don't want to pick up a pebble from the road. But for my mind, when you win, you got to stand chest out of the top of the limo on your way out of the air. Don't do that on the way in, just in case a pebble hits you from the way out when you're celebrating. You got to do I'm the winner. But anyhow, that is a great list. I always say this about sponsors, particularly amateurs, advanced amateurs, early pros, regional pros like you. Those sponsorships mean a lot. And I think those sponsors get better coverage and more exposure because at the end of the day, and now the UFC has banned personal sponsorships, which I think is dumb. At the end of the day, when it got to that level, it was kind of hard to stand out. But you get a lot of publicity, whether it's the limo, whether it's the other. Some of the fighters I know are sponsored by a meat store, and that's awesome, right? It's the local shops that make a difference, the local supporters, the local businesses that make a difference. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's an honor to have you on. And I can't wait to see what you do at Mecca 23 for Ignite Promotions out there in Minnesota on 2 November. Can't wait for it. Thanks so much for taking the time out. Also, really awesome to hear they got out to High Elevation. My name's Luke Payson. I've been interviewing the one, the only, Kyle Professor Problematic Zimick. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. You take care.